massive news surrounding an AEW wrestler who is no longer going to be with the company. It's been officially confirmed that this wrestler in particular will not be re-signed. And honestly, I got a lot to say about it. We're also going to talk about Stone Cold Steve Austin for WrestleMania 39. And of course, we got to talk about AEW Dark, which is subject to a lot of controversy after seeing Jeff Hardy on the show. Now, with that being said, if you guys want more videos like this, don't forget to click that subscribe button and ring the bell for more. Now, I want to kick things off with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Some of you loved his match at WrestleMania with Kevin Owens. Some of you may have loved what he did with Vince McMahon and Austin Theory and Pat McAfee. And maybe you guys are on the other side of the spectrum where you just absolutely hate WWE regardless of who's in it, and you hated it. Now, I, for one, am a huge fan of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And while I prefer to focus on the young up-and-coming stars of WWE, I totally understand that WrestleMania was truly an appropriate time for Stone Cold to be involved, and therefore I was a fan of it. Even the stupid, ridiculous botch stunner was absolutely funny, and it's fun to laugh a little bit. Now, with that being said, on the Brewbound podcast, Stone Cold Steve Austin reflected on his return at WrestleMania 38, and he actually confirmed that he would be interested in being part of WrestleMania 39. Now, the question here is whether or not he would wrestle, and I don't think that would be the case, but you never know. Maybe WWE wants to put him in the ring with Brock Lesnar, maybe Roman Reigns. There's a lot of rumors surrounding that. But he says that for me to participate at WrestleMania 38, if you had told me, hey, man, you're going to be part of WrestleMania 38, not only that, you're going to main event night one, I would have said you're full of shit and you're crazy, he said. But here I was in Dallas, Texas, headlining main eventing day one. So never say never, but I would imagine within the scope of that show, that's going to be a big show in a big time city, and it will be a 2-night event again. So I'm sure I am done wrestling per se, but as part of WWE, I can't imagine that I would not be there in some capacity. So for those who are wondering whether or not Stone Cold Steve Austin will actually wrestle, I think it's safe to say that it's likely not going to happen. But the idea of him being there should be expected. And I, for one, would love to see Stone Cold there. In fact, I would love to see him work with other people that are also on the rise. I thought Kevin Owens carried that feud. Having him in the ring with Stone Cold, it was just great storytelling. It was really fun. It was really cool to see that happen. And I hope that they can do something similar to that for next year. Maybe for an up-and-comer like Austin Theory. All right, guys. You know, AEW Dark is not something I've necessarily been a fan of. I don't consider it a developmental brand. I've been on record saying it more than once that AEW Dark is a brand that is there to help pad the records for wins and losses for wrestlers. That it's a mess, in my opinion. Now, it's great that AEW Dark is a platform, especially during COVID, in which indie wrestlers were able to work in this industry that was affected. So it has its pros, but it definitely has its cons. Now, obviously, there has been a lot of talk about AEW Dark in terms of, you know, whether it's actually good for AEW, bad for AEW, and whatnot. And a lot of what I have seen has been negative, especially when you see somebody like Jeff Hardy on AEW Dark. Now, Booker T was talking about this on his show, and it was very interesting because Booker T is not a fan of AEW Dark. He looks at it as a demotion. He does not look at it as something that is good for these wrestlers to be there. And I don't think AEW intentionally puts Jeff Hardy there or Ruby Soho on these shows as a demotion. But the way I look at it is we don't have anything for you on television right now. We want you to increase your wins and loss record, right? We want to increase your record overall. We need to give you these matches so we can pad your record. And I have often looked at this as a bad idea. I think AEW doesn't necessarily have a developmental system. A lot of these people aren't contracted to AEW full time. So there's not really a risk per se. But to me, there has been a lot of talk about guys going from AEW Dynamite, a new signing, for example, going to Dynamite, showing up, and then immediately going to Dark. And it's not a good look, by the way. I also don't like the fact that AEW tends to, you know, like, for example, Marina Shafir had not really been introduced to the main roster crowd when you look at it. From, like, the Dynamite perspective, yes, the very, very, very hardcore audience that watches the super, super indies, the GCW and stuff, like, yes, they know who Marina Shafir was, so they obviously started to react accordingly. But a lot of people didn't know what was happening. And I think there's a huge disconnect between Dynamite and Rampage compared to Dark and Elevation. Jeff Hardy being on Dark is a very, very questionable thing. I know a lot of people will try to defend it, but I just don't like the way that it's being done. I don't like the way it's being handled, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. So really, what is the solution to this? I think you have to really start focusing on creating some sort of developmental platform. Whether that's indie wrestlers or not, it doesn't really matter. They don't have to be full-time wrestlers, but if you're going to have a platform for indie wrestlers to wrestle, don't use it to pad people's records, because there is no continuity from Dark and the thing, right? Like, there's a disconnect between how AEW tells their stories, and they just expect everybody to watch Dark and Elevation. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of wrestling happening. It's very hard to keep up with it all, and I think that's a really big concern. So when Booker T says that it's a demotion, he does not want to work on Dark. You know, it's only a show on the internet. Like, I get that perspective. Something is really weird about this, and I wish, you know, even WWE has main event. It's pointless. It doesn't do anything for your product. It doesn't do anything for your promotion. I see how WWE handles that. Like, now you got T-Bar and Ciampa on there. It's just ridiculous thinking. These companies need to really start realizing, like, you can do so much more with what you have. You have the talent, you have the resources, you have the money, and you could be doing things so much more differently. All right, guys, you know we had been talking about guys leaving AEW, and I understand this, right? But it appears that Jack Evans is not being re-signed by AEW. In fact, Jack Evans announced on social media, on Twitter, he tweeted, "My time with AEW has been fun and enjoyable, but it has come to an end, and I will not be re-signed when my contract ends at the end of April. I'd like to thank everyone at AEW and the AEW fans for the opportunity." Now, here's the thing. Jack Evans leaving is not really a shocker. Him not being re-signed is not necessarily a shocker. But I bring this up because I really want to pay attention to one thing, right? Look at what I just said about AEW Dark. It doesn't really have any special meaning to it. TH2 had video packages, and they were being teased for their signing with AEW. And in the very, very beginning stages of AEW, TH2 was reportedly planned for a pretty nice role. And the minute that AEW wanted to turn their attention to other tag teams, more popular tag teams, which I totally understand, TH2 became a thing where if you were going to see them, they were going to be seen on Dark. That just goes to show you how much of a priority Dark and Elevation actually mean to AEW. We can call it what it is, a show that pads the records. But really, that is the show where when we don't have something for you, that's where you're going to work. Now, I understand why AEW is not re-signing Jack Evans. But ultimately, at the same time, too, the AEW that I saw in the beginning seemed pretty damn focused about giving opportunities to those that didn't necessarily have it. But instead of solving that problem, as time went on, it appeared to me that AEW was focused on a very specific few amount of tag teams, which I'm not, again, I love the AEW tag team division. But I imagine it would have actually been better if AEW tried giving them a chance. And to me, it did not appear that way. And I'm not criticizing AEW here because they suck. Again, I'm going to continue saying this. AEW shows signs of greatness. But I think there's an issue with priorities depending on talent and stuff like that. And I don't know. Maybe Jack Evans was problematic backstage. Maybe not. I don't know. There's obviously stuff that we don't know here. But we also know to make room for all of these new signings, you got to let certain talent go. And I just feel like some people have not even been given the chance. That's the issue. I imagine more people would have been supportive if TH2 was given the chance, because I think if AEW gives them the chance, I think people would be like, wow, they really are doing something different than WWE. But again, I love the AEW tag team division. It's absolutely crowded, and they got a lot of great tag teams. So I understand both sides of the spectrum. But Jack Evans is leaving the company. To me, I'm not necessarily shocked, but who knows what's happening? What happens with Angelico? We're going to find out too. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'll see you next time.